Invincible Season 2 is back this week with the second episode, and this one definitely built upon the first one. Not necessarily with the wider plot which was focused on Angstrom Levy, but more so in terms of the personal growth and development of Mark and his mother Debbie, whilst also highlighting the divide that's present between those who believe in wanting to be protected by those who have powers and those who don't. With Shapesmith being introduced to us, Mark going rogue and Donald getting a bit sus about his own existence. Let's recap, break down, and explain all the important info from this episode, as well as calling out key moments that I think will come back and have some importance, as well as that crack in the title card. So let's get into it. Here is Invincible Season 2 Episode 2, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Angstrom Levy and Invincible. Right at the end of the episode, after the credits started rolling, we had a scene that was occurring between Angstrom Levy and Mark as he appeared to be being held captive. At first, I did wonder what we were seeing because we obviously saw Mark in a completely different state before the credits rolled. But then it became clear that we were in a different dimension. Mark was being held in the Pentagon as this was a universe where he sided with his father and tried to take over the world to make it part of the Viltrum Empire. We saw that Angstrom found out from him how it was that he was taken captive and held prisoner. This was before Donald and Cecil entered, but in this dimension they were both female, and I can't get over what Donald looked like in this scene. Come on. With Angstrom departing and saying that he was Mark's problem, but not this Mark's problem, this to me makes me think that he's going to be hopping through dimensions and finding the versions of Invincible that had maybe been defeated, and trying to learn what Mark's biggest weaknesses actually are. Then, once he has the resources to do so, he'll then be able to bring it to the dimension where the somatic encoder exploded and killed all of the other Angstroms, and then look to defeat Invincible that way. So instead of Angstrom utilizing his powers as a way of helping people, he's going to be using them to find every ounce of Mark that can be defeated. So I guess we'll see small moments like this throughout the season until we get to the climax where Angstrom will most likely be ready to take him on. The importance of the opening scene. There were a couple of moments in the opening scene that I felt held quite a lot of importance. We obviously heard the principal talking about how a lot of the skills that the students learned in high school would also be transferable into their day-to-day lives when they graduated. And during this, we also saw that they were applicable to Mark when he was trying to defeat the Magmamites and Dr. Seismic, something which we did see him do. But what we also saw was that Mark was on the cusp of missing his graduation due to his commitment to Cecil. We saw Mark also acting as though he couldn't take a break with his mother and get out of the country due to his commitment too. I think this opening section was the laying down of the foundations of the obsession that Mark is going to have with being a superhero, and the blindsided nature that he's going to have to everything and everybody around him, as we saw in those two small but important moments that were in his life outside of being a hero. I feel it will continue as the season goes on, and maybe even start to impact his relationship with Amber, ultimately resulting in him being alone, and eventually maybe even turning to be more like his father. The crack in the title card. In the first episode of Season 2, we saw that there was a slight crack that appeared in the title card which occurred at the end of the episode, and then within this episode, something similar happened. A separate crack occurred and a chunk came out, and this was where we saw that there was an underlayer that was present. I think this crack could be symbolizing some kind of break in the different dimensions that are present, with us having Angstrom Levy going through the multiple dimensions and disrupting them all in many different ways. What's to say that they're not going to collapse in on themselves and cause a massive crack, where we could end up seeing Mark facing another Mark, or maybe even a different Omni Man. They've chosen to go down a multiverse path, so it could definitely have something to do with that, and I for one am excited for that prospect. Shapesmith's true identity. Within this episode we were introduced to Shapesmith, and Shapesmith is in fact a Martian that hitched a ride to Earth that took on the form of Russ Livingston, who we saw in Season 1 of the show when Invincible was helping save the astronauts. With him leaving the actual Russ to be infected, he took on his form and pretended to be him ever since. Hence why he ended up losing his job and taking an absence of leave. During the end of the episode, we saw that Shapesmith wanted to become part of the Guardians of the Globe after witnessing Martian Man on the news and wanting to follow in his footsteps. So it looks like we're going to be seeing something like that happening, especially with the Immortal at the head of the Guardians and looking to get more power on his side. Debbie's grief. Debbie is well and truly feeling the loneliness in having no Nolan around her, and no Mark either. Small things such as the cupboard door being loose was bothering her to the point of insanity, because it would usually be something that would get resolved and fixed by Nolan. However, with it being there and not being fixed, it's a constant reminder that she's alone. Mark going off and fighting, with her pushing a break upon him, it showed that she was mainly doing it for herself. This empty, wide shot really did reinforce the space that she was probably feeling. I feel for Debbie because she's an innocent victim in all of this, and she's the one paying the price. There was a moment when she returned to work and was trying to sell a house to a couple, where she saw that the female partner was being treated terribly by the male partner, and Debbie uttered under her breath, "She's not your pet," obviously showing that the description of her from Nolan was still stuck in her mind, and there was no way that she was shaking it anytime soon. With her breaking down and crying at the end and even pushing Mark away, it shows that she's truly grieving. Grieving Nolan's love, grieving the loss of her husband, grieving her son's happiness, her own happiness, and also the life that she had before where everything was okay. Even though Nolan didn't love her, she loved him, and it's so painful to witness her mourning that. The show is doing a great job at portraying Debbie's arc, and I'm really impressed by it. Mark's resentment towards his father and his fear of becoming him. There were many moments in the first episode and several in this episode too, where we saw that Mark was either showing his resentment towards his father, the fact that he was the individual that was repaying the debts that his father owed and also paying the price for the damage that he had caused, whilst also carrying the burden and fear of becoming him. We saw that when Mark was fighting with Nightboy, he actually channeled the mindset that his father had and showed the aggression that we were used to seeing in Omni Man. This was done in order to get him to heal and take the more dominant role in getting him to subdue. When Nightboy compared Mark to his father, we saw that he instantly told him to not say that, and then from there he changed, showing that there is a stark similarity there in the burning fire that's inside him. Let's remember as well, in alternate dimensions, Mark did side with his father, so they are very similar at their core. There was also another moment in this episode which I felt was supposed to be a nice moment, but to me it just reminded me of Omni Man. This was when Mark took Amber to Vegas for a lunch date. It reminded me of the times that Nolan would say that he took Debbie to Italy for pizza and things like that. So again, it reinforced the fact that he's like his father even though he doesn't want to be, and there are certain traits that can't be avoided. However, the most redeeming side to Mark's feelings for his father came when he saved the creatures in Atlantis from the monster that was down there and not leaving them to be destroyed by it, even though they were cheering for him to be dead. His father was the reason as to why he was there, and the burning hatred that they had, so he wanted to put it right, and technically he did. Overall review. I thought this was a great episode of the show. The level of depth that this show goes to in terms of delving into the characters' emotions, dilemmas, and motives is incredible, and they feel like real human beings. Whether it be Mark's attempt to not end up like his father, Eve's issues with her parents, or Debbie's grief, it feels like we're going along with it. There was actually quite a lot that happened in this week's episode, and with it climaxing with Supreme Lizard being killed and King Lizard being the individual that wants to lead mass change, there's an arm that we're definitely going to be seeing getting developed, most likely with the Guardians of the Globe. With only 2 episodes left until the show takes a break, I feel it's definitely going to be leaving us on a cliffhanger. So far, the pacing has been good, and I just hope it continues to go down that path. I think I'm actually going to do a whole video on Mark, the struggles that he's going through, and document how it's actually impacting the character. So if you'd like to see that, then let me know in the comments below. So, there you have it, Invincible Season 2 Episode 2 Ending Explained.